So I listened to this boring 2-hour conversation just with the hopes that maybe the demons conversation would come up, and it did. But oh man, I'm so disappointed. Now, not only do I think JD Vance is the creator of these narratives, right, or whatever you want to call it, right, but he's actually not even that intellectually curious, despite the fact that he goes, oh, Curtis Yarvin and all of these cool, interesting things, and he's clearly an intelligent person, but yet, to me, I'm wholly convinced that he's now 100% pure politician. Does not care.
I just haven't done it yet.
You said something that I thought was very odd.
Okay.
You said that you thought that they were demons.
Okay. I did say that.
What did you mean by that?
Well,
Bit of a long pause there.
First of all, there not just in Christianity, but in a number of world religions, there are a number of mystical things that happened, extra dimensional, extra. Like I'm not one of these people who's like a hyper rationalist. Like I think that there are things happening in the world that we're not always seeing. I believe in God. I think that there is.
Okay. He said it wrong. I'm not a hyper materialist or a pure materialist when he says there's mystical properties. He means materialist, not rationalist. Fine enough. But he's just reiterating what he's already said. Okay. The myths, people need stories or archetypes or metaphors to be able to interpret non-interpretable phenomenon. Simple enough.
A kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Not extra real.
Supernatural.
Supernatural. There are supernatural things that are happening. Okay. So if you look historically at, things that are similar to the alien phenomenon, where, some like strange being, it kind of looks like a human being, but doesn't look like, but it's not human. And it shows a particular interest in human beings. And then it takes the human beings and, does weird experiments on them. I think my argument is that's either bullshit, right? You're either talking to a crazy person, which I don't like. I'm not saying just because I believe in this.
I feel like he's just rambling. Like why are we talking about abductions, alien abductions? The conversation is about how do we interpret the potential of supernatural life. He's like, oh, well, there's crazy people. It's like, yes, okay, good enough. We established that.
Supernatural doesn't mean I believe in everything supernatural. But if we're talking about an extraterrestrial being that is human-like but not human, that contains effectively infinite powers and is torturing human beings, you can call it an alien if you want, but I think there's a lot of historical precedent to call that a demon.
Overall, that's not anything too terrible or too unreasonable, right? If there are demons controlling people, subjecting them to horrible, unexplainable phenomenon, then they're practically the same as demons. Whether or not you call them aliens or demons is just a matter of, let's say, metaphysical beliefs. But at the end of the day, at least we can kind of have some sort of phenomenon we're talking about. So I just skipped, it's an abduction story, not really important. But this is JD Vance's first response to how to interpret an abduction story. He already said they're crazy people, so he could just say they're crazy people, but he calls them angels.
So I guess my response to that would be extra powerful beings, in this case communicating telepathically, helping people. Sounds like an angel. So I guess
Right.
here's let me
Right.
make the Steelman version of my argument. It's that, okay, my dog there's no real difference between me and God to my dog. I can literally walk into a room and turn the light on. I can make food appear instantaneously. I can transport myself across time and space very, very rapidly. If you're a human being with intelligence, but not supernatural intelligence, I guess my point is, again, this could all be bullshit. This could all be fake.
So yes, a simple enough example. It's just higher powers. How do we interpret higher powers? What is the bottom line metaphysical reality that people believe the universe operates under? That's the core question here. What is the very first thing that exists before anything else? Right? JD Vance is going to say God. We'll hear what Joe Rogan has to say.
That's a possibility. But if it's real, is there really a meaningful difference between an angel or a demon and a space alien with super technology? To our perception, they would largely just look like the same thing.
I think we're capable of nuance, and we're capable of understanding that human beings are far more complex and evolved than chimpanzees. And we could imagine a world where if we don't blow ourselves up and there's not a nuclear bomb and we don't get hit by an asteroid, if we live another million years, that we would have technology that's indistinguishable from magic, right?
Exactly.
The important note here, though, is would we still be human? We wouldn't still be us, right? The assumption, the implicit assumption in the idea that if we just progress, we have better technology, is to assume somehow that human beings are capable of comprehending whatever comes to them. They are the masters of the universe. Just being an intelligent life form makes you master of the universe. But that's not really necessarily true. How do you deal with some other super intelligence beaming thoughts into your head? That's a pretty psychotic state-inducing experience. There isn't something that is human to that experience. It just isn't. And yes, maybe you can kind of have the concept of higher life forms, but this doesn't really answer the question of there being a god or being higher life forms, because if there are these higher life forms, that's just as much evidence to suggest that there is an even higher life form or a point of origination for consciousness or intelligence or life forms in general. It's strange to me to just say, well, aliens could be doing it just to fuck with us in the same way like we experiment on rats. Like, sure. But to the rat, we're pretty devilish, per se.
That's
Right,
exactly
but
what I'm
that
saying.
doesn't
And then we
mean
could
that
show
they're
up on another
angels and
planet.
demons. It just
Well,
means they're
I-
hyper-evolved, advanced civilizations from somewhere else.
And what I'm saying is the perception of those beings to a more simple intelligence,
Sure.
there's not a meaningful difference. So you're like talking about what it is that these things actually are. And I guess what I'm talking about is how would a human being with my level of intelligence or your level of intelligence in 2026 understand what's going on?
Right, but from a biblical perspective, there's a very big difference between a demon and a hyper-intelligent being from somewhere else.
Okay. Right? They cleared the ground. They answered everything. And now we're in the theology aspect of it. And the answer, to me, the answer is not really, in a sense. If your interpretation of angels and demons is that they have to be something that, by definition, is not possible or doesn't exist, then you will never accept the framing of angels and demons. Right? To Joe, angels and demons is not a question of interpretation or experience or interfaith, submission type of sensation. There is no religious experience to these things for Joe. It is simply just the material aspect of it.
A demon or a hyper-intelligent,
Well,
malicious...
if demons are real, if there really are dark forces in the universe, and they're disembodied dark forces, these things that exist,
Yes.
and then there's also powerful light forces in
Yeah.
the universe. That they don't have to be mutually exclusive to the
They do not-
concept of hyper intelligent
Correct.
other species.
Absolutely.
When you're looking at an insanely vast
I just like how Joe answers the question for JD. It's like, yeah, it's like, if there are alien genociders, then they would be demons.
universe.
I don't think they have to be, but I think that it is interesting to me that for most of human history, we would have understood supernatural, hyper-powerful, hyper-knowledgeable things as sort of celestial, or celestial
We would
is
have
actually a
thought of
terrible
a
word.
cell phone as being sorcery.
They skip past just something worth touching on. It doesn't necessarily have to be tied to advanced civilizations. In some ways, that could be true. One of the basic assumptions of this conversation is that life and consciousness are an evolved property from certain conditions and that it's chance oriented, that there isn't an intention to this evolutionary process, that it isn't pointing in a direction. There isn't a meaning imprinted on it by an outside force, right? If we came across aliens and they were the exact same as us, what type of interpretation would we have? It's like, okay, well, maybe only human life forms are capable of existing, but that would suggest some sort of kind of innate structure to life and conscious experience, an innate direction, something that happens outside of pure chance. Because, I mean, you can imagine or have pure chance for everything. And like the way to think about this is like, if you tumble a bunch of rocks down a hill, there's going to be a certain way that the rocks fall onto each other and form in order to be stable, right? There's only so many ways because of a natural kind of law to the physics and to the forces at play of rocks tumbling down the hill, which is why, every ancient civilization built pyramids. It's not because aliens gave them pyramids, it's because there's a certain physics-based aspect to building 4-point pyramid-shaped objects that make them very stable. There's a natural law process to it, much in the same way that you could argue the phenomenon of consciousness appears in the universe. But that's besides the point. A little bit too deep. Back to the conversation.
That doesn't
Maybe
mean
it
it's
is.
sorcery. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just technology. That argument.
Okay, again, yeah, because sorcery, it implicitly says in his mind that magical things don't exist. It's like, but to someone who believes these, they aren't magical, they are real. Right? We might just use magic or mystical or sorcery as terms, but to someone in Joe's position, these by nature aren't real. If we experience them as mystical, magical things, they could be real. That's exactly what the people who believe it's real are saying. We're just sitting on two. To me, this is very much like, my favorite color is blue, so everybody's favorite color has to be blue. It's like, no, mine's red, so everybody's has to be red.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
And this is not discounting the possibility of demons or discounting the possibility of angels.
well, I guess I understand your point conceptually. I don't actually disagree with it. So I don't think we're saying something different. That metaphysically, there could be two separate things going on. There could be there could be extra Earth, outside of Earth, space aliens, and there could also be angels and demons. These could be two totally separate things. One could be true and not the other. I totally concede and agree with that point. I guess what I'm saying is it's a distinction that is conceptually interesting to me, but
Okay, so he backs off quite a bit.
if a space alien with like superhuman technology comes to the Earth and has malicious intent, I don't know how I'm supposed to tell the difference between that and a demon.
If they have malicious intent. But I mean, isn't that also the case with visiting people, right? Like you could have a country and you get visited by the
Yeah, and they call you White Devil or something, right?
Peace Corps, or you get visited by pirates.
Yeah.
And are the pirates demons? As the Peace Corps angels?
No, but I think we're talking about something much different. I mean,
Are we talking about something different, or are we talking about a hyper advanced version of that?
We're talking about, I mean, as I understand it, we're talking about things that exist outside the United States. Outside of the Earth.
If I was forcing myself to make the underlying metaphysical angels and demons at war like argument, right, and that God's will is involved in it and somehow, and that he's trying to be good against evil, whatever it is, right? Like, I think first you have to understand that the conscious experience, or the types of life forms that are doing these interdimensional sort of shooting brain waves and manipulating people and performing invisible space-time breaking technology, are not going to have the same types of experience and conceptions the way humans do now, even if they are humans and they're breaking the fabric of the universe. They're not going to maintain the same experience we have. I mean, we can't even take hallucinogenic drugs without completely shattering our minds or having something akin to a religious experience. We can even induce religious experiences on us. And this is without doing insane things like implementing, chips into our brains and adding all kinds of cybernetic type technologies. It's going to warp and break our minds and the way we see the world. Like, imagine if we literally had a technology that allows us to control and perceive parts of our unconscious experience, to make the self whole, right? The ego and the self whole, right? All the time. That's a mind-shattering experience to have. There's really not much you can say or argue against these types of life forms being closer or more an understanding of God's will, or more a part of God's plan in a sense. Or at least having like closer insights of sorts. It doesn't even have to be pirates and peacekeepers. It could be just two nations at war. Two nations who, just like us, believe they are fighting each other, right? It is because the being a part of the plan is not about being good or being absolutely certain. It is sort of just about being within the kind of light, within the imbued grace of sorts. Kind of having the ability to engage in these thoughts or these perceptions, have an interpretive lens, have like a frame of reference. If you engage in these types of combats, let's say, right, these struggles, even at the human level, removing God becomes a very abstract, open-ended exercise. Or just removing religiosity becomes an open-ended exercise, and a very like self-centered exercise of sorts. And when you kind of bring this into the realm of earth-shattering space-shattering, space-time shattering technologies, it's going to compound in effect. It's going to become immense. It's going to become even more complex, even more demanding on our minds, on our brains, the little muscle that it is. So yeah, if I was making this case, there really is nothing to say that if we have more technology, we somehow become further away from a religious worldview or closer to a religious worldview, right? That's only an assumption because of the last few hundred years, because science has answered some questions that the church was required to kind of provide for people. But in other ways, it's only begged more questions and failed to answer meaningful questions in other ways. So who knows?
You're looking for me to concede the point that there is something different, or could be something different, between an angel, a demon, a space alien, a supernatural, but non any of those other things beings. Yes, I concede that.
I think if I'm just gonna kind of come full circle with this, a lot of this conversation is mainly just for fun. It's not meant to be serious. But what it does do is it reveals a lot about someone's foundational interpretation of kind of just life in general. Because aliens is a very fair conversation. There's nothing that is critical in terms of your interpretation of aliens. It's a fair judgment you can make on people, because you can have pretty much any interpretation of aliens and people accept it, even if you're a schizophrenic who thinks he's abducted or been abducted. Then people will even accept that on some level way more, give you charity way more than any type of political position you might make. And to me, this is why I kind of come to this conversation, because I used to think aliens were ridiculous and stupid and it was a waste of time. But realizing that the person who thinks they've been abducted, the person who thinks that they aren't real, it's a waste of time, or even the person who has this religious worldview, it's a very revealing thing. It's a good predictor of people. You can group them very easily. You can make these judgments very easily, very fairly. And these types of judgments are necessary even, because it gives you so much information about this person in other ways. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's no criticism, right? You make judgments on race, sex, whatever it is, then people have all of these pre-existing, I guess, like one-liners in response. Oh, that's so wrong. How could you? I'm offended. Whatever it is, making a judgment on people's belief in aliens is innocent. You can do it. And it relies very heavily on all of our sort of built up natural knowledge, our subconscious bias, right? If you really want to use that term, to not only to understand these people, but to empathize with them. And strangely enough, I don't know why, but there is this kind of feeling in this air that as time moves on over these next few years, it becomes not only necessary, but meaningful and consequential to make these judgments on the world, in the political space, in your everyday lives. I'm not saying to go out and ask people what they think about aliens, but if the conversation broaches, pay attention at least. But whatever, besides the point. Nothing else really to say. I learned a lot. Hopefully you guys did too. Catch you guys in the next one.